So Frank and Mary. I don't think we need the mic. We're good. I can't take your water. There you go. You got water. You're all set. So just kicking off right off the bat, just share a little bit about your background so everyone gets to know what you've done in the past, what you're doing now, and maybe share one interesting thing that folks may not know about you. We'll start off with the person closest to me. Go for it, Frank.
I'm going to say ladies first.
Oh.
So my career has started in sales. I've been a car salesman. I've been a real estate salesman. I've been a commodity salesperson. And where my career really took off was when I moved to a small little market research company called Forrester Research, which was completely different from what I had been doing in the past, which was more of a B2C sale or a retail sale. And at Forrester, I really had to teach myself how to become a B2B salesperson without anybody helping me to do so. So I was fortunate enough to get exposed to a simple little sales methodology called Miller-Hyman. And I read one of their books, and I just put that book to work without any question. And that helped me become a fairly successful salesperson at Forrester Research. I had a really nice run there. I was at the company for about 12 years. Became their first salesperson, their first sales leader, helped develop a training program around the Miller-Hyman methodologies. Also built out competencies to help improve our hiring practices. And of course, we took the company public and spent a few more years after that there, and then moved on to a couple smaller companies that didn't have quite the same kind of success. So I was, I guess, fortunate enough to see both sides of the equation, where a really nice run that allowed me to grow and to put some money in my pocket, and also a couple of runs that taught me some of the lessons of hard knocks on what what happens when it's not that easy, which I'm sure we've all been a part of at one time or another in your career. And most recently, I'm coming off about a 7-year run with an operating unit within Wolters Kluwer, which is about a $5 billion Dutch-owned company in the content space, providing content to the financial services market, to the legal market, to the accounting market, and specifically where I was in the healthcare space, developing a capability that was serving the provider market, helping them make better decisions as they treated patients on a day-to-day basis. Had a really nice run there, walked into an organization that was about $60 million in revenue, found a sales organization that had no structure, had salespeople that were not compensated on their individual contribution. They weren't measured on their individual contribution. They were measured on the overall success of the organization. So you could have two people sitting next to each other, one working very hard, one not working very hard, and at the end of the year, they were both making the same kind of money. So opportunity rich to evolve that organization and to put some metrics in place, put some training in place, put a structure around how the organization should operate, both in its current state, but as it evolved into its future state. And fortunate enough to have a nice run there to grow to about $300 million when I left about a year ago. And now I'm about 45 days into my next venture, which is a company that's been around for about 20 years and has a very strong brand in a very specific area of the pharmaceutical space, and have a very similar kind of opportunity that I just came off of at Up to Date, the Wolters Kluwer company, where I have a very unsophisticated sales organization that needs a lot of structure and discipline and a sales approach that we're building out in a very similar way that I've done in my past career. Something interesting about me?
Something interesting, yes.
Well, I've probably put about 2 semesters into my college career, so I don't have a degree, and I think that shocks a lot of people when I tell them that after they've been working with me for a while. So,
Right.
Hire people who don't have college degrees; they can be good for you. They want to work harder.
Absolutely.
That's a tough act to follow. So.
Sorry.
Sorry. So let's see, I came out of college as an accountant and hated it. So I did public accounting for about 4 years and enjoyed it as I was working with clients out and about traveling. And then as when you're in public accounting, you get your CPA, then you go into private, and I thought to myself, what am I doing here? General ledgers, I'm bored out of my mind. And I was sitting in this beautiful office at Kendall Square looking out the window, and I said, I can't do this. I'm just crazy bored. And I called a headhunter, and I remember hearing in the background all this hubbub, and I'm like, I need to come in and see you. And she said, we just placed you here. I'm like, I can't do this. And I went in there, and I walked through the doors, and I said, I want to work here. And they gave me a shot, and I was a headhunter for 5 or 6 years selling accounting and finance to folks placing accounting and finance professionals, and had a great run, enjoyed it. And I remember as I was branching out and thinking about what I wanted to do, I loved selling, I knew that, wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And I had a friend that was over at Monster, and he said, I'm not quite sure this is going to be a fit for you, you're on quota. As a headhunter, you're not really on quota, but I was like, I want to give this a shot. And so they hired me, and I was at Monster for 7 years. I started their staffing team because I had that vertical experience. I worked with some fantastic people and started getting interested in selling software. I had no experience at all in selling software. And a friend of mine, who was an intern for me at Monster, ended up getting a job at HubSpot. HubSpot was this little-known company with about, I think, 20 people at the time. And he said, it's really, really small. You might want to try it. We're really not sure what we sell yet, but it's got to do with SEO. I didn't even know what SEO meant. What's SEO? I'm like, sure. I'm like, I'll come in and meet with some folks. And I went in and I met with the team, and I remember the recruiter said to me, do you know what SEM means? No idea whatsoever. What about SEO? I said, well, I learned recently that it's search engine optimization. Well, do you know anything about Google and how you would rank on Google? No, I have no idea. And I'm like, this is definitely not going to work here for you. And I said, give me a shot. Let me meet with some folks. And I ended up 7 interviews in. I met with everyone. I met with Mark Roberge. And Mark put me through the paces of figuring out if I was coachable. This is really, if you've seen Mark talk, you'll hear this concept. It's fascinating, actually. So what he does is he puts up on a screen a tool that HubSpot did at the time, it was the keyword grader tool, I think. He said, I'm going to demo this to you, and when I'm done with it, I want you to tell me what you think about it and treat me like I'm a prospect and talk to me about it. So I listened to what he had to say, and I demoed it back to him, and I added some nuance for some of my style, and he said, all right, nicely done. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to get this job. I don't know why I'm investing all this time here. And so I met, finally, the recruiter set me up with Brian Halligan. And Brian Halligan, I'll never forget it, he's sitting in his office, he's sitting on his hands, he's, I don't know if you guys know it, but he's like a little kid, He sits there and he's got his feet dangling off his bench. He said, what are you doing here? He's like, you've never sold software, I've heard you met a bunch of people, I heard people like you, but I'm not going to hire you. And I said to him, after a few minutes of talking with him, I said, Brian, with all due respect, if you hire me, I will be your #1 right here. And he went back to the recruiter and he said, I loved her. And they gave me a shot. And I don't know why they did. I'm glad that they did. I took forever to ramp at HubSpot. It took me a long time to acclimate because I'd never sold software. But I will tell you, for the 6 years that I was there, I loved every minute of it. It was a blast. I worked with people that deeply cared about development and progression. They were visionary, they were committed, best group of people that I ever had the pleasure to work with. So I had a wonderful run there. I was there through the IPO, and I had started the enterprise team with a bunch of folks there. And they had, after they had gone public, had decided that they were going to go more the SMB route, more mid-market. And with the enterprise experience I had, I really wanted to carry that forward. So I decided to join another team over at Evercage as the director of sales, carrying my automation experience and doing some personalization. And then was recruited over to, I was there for about a year, was recruited over to a brand new startup to do open source automation and really start to develop the vision around intelligence and really helping marketers to fill the gaps of their ecosystem. So there I am today. So I think I've had a lot of breaks in my career, but I've really welcomed the challenge and been very lucky to be with some wonderful people that have encouraged me and helped me to be where I am today.
What's the name of the company?
Oh, I'm working for a company called Mautic, and they're in Boston. Yeah.
Your company, Evaluate.
Evaluate group.
Evaluate.
Yeah.
And you didn't answer the one question about one interesting routine.
I don't know if you'll find it interesting. So I was an equestrian for a long time, from the time I was about 18 to in my early 20s. And I think if I hadn't started to branch into the business world in college, I probably would have gone to the Olympics and done dressage and event riding. It was definitely a passion of mine. So.
Yeah, we've had a few speakers in the past that kind of had that strong athletic bent, and something took a turn and they went another route. In fact, I think one gentleman you may know, Mike Satterfield, was quite an accomplished hockey player and coach. So,
Mark, am I
yeah.
going to use a microphone? People are having. Sorry.
Is it on? Oh, there we go. Okay. So we're going to go with the mic so that everyone can hear us, because I think we're having a good conversation. So make sure that they are part of it. But I'll pass the mic along. You could speak into the ball thing. But Mary, I want to ask you particularly, because you made a jump from something which is a little bit different, recruiting, into the software sales role, right? That must have taken a lot of effort to try and figure out how to do that, right? We're talking tonight about developing sales rock stars. But I want to actually dig a little bit into your own personal stories of how you prepared yourself for that journey. So could you share a little bit about what it took for you to feel confident to be able to consistently perform in a world that was completely new for you?
Sure. So I knew that I could sell, and I sort of carried that with me, and I was very committed to figuring this out. I will tell you that I probably hold the record for taking the longest to ramp at HubSpot ever. And Mark Roberge laughs about it today, and whenever someone struggled at HubSpot, Mark would always go to them and say, I should talk to Mary Rogul. It took her like almost a year to figure out what we sell here. And it did, it took me a long time, but I think where I sort of was able to salvage it, I was always able to have the business conversation. So whenever I would get nervous, or if I felt like I wasn't doing what I should be doing on the software side, I would always revert back to developing rapport with someone and learning about their business and figuring out what is it that's bringing you to us. Tell me a little bit about your story. What is it in your environment today that's making you look at this tool? And let's talk a little bit about where you would like to be. What's the ideal scenario for you if you were to invest in HubSpot? Where would you see yourself moving forward? Is it a conversion rate? Is it developing better content? So I would use the resources that I had available to me at HubSpot, and there were plenty of people that were there to help. But I would also just get into the nitty-gritty of what it was that prospect needed. And I have an empathetic approach, it's just my makeup, and I really care deeply about their business, and I want to learn about it. And I'm not about pitching. I don't really care about the software, I care about how we can help you. What is it that you can take away from my conversation today that's going to make a difference for you? And if ultimately it's bringing on our tool, fantastic. But I find that if I can take a step back and really get into the heart of the matter for them, it made a difference, whether I was selling software or anything else.
So likewise, Frank, can you tell a little about just your story about how you ramped up? Because you've been in different sales. When you actually started in software, how did you get yourself up?
Yeah, I think it has to do a lot with your passion and your desire and your commitment to improving yourself. And if you have those components, then you can drive yourself to find help. When I started my enterprise career, it was a small little company. There was 3 of us in a small little office, and the other folks were analysts. They weren't salespeople, so they had no concept around selling. I was coming from really a B2C space, which is dramatically different in terms of how you position your capabilities, who you talk to, the way you drive the sales through the process. And so, as I said earlier, Miller Hyman was a starting point for me, but I knew I needed some help. Right. And so, as a self-learner and a voracious reader of business books, I put myself to work and tried to take the learnings out of those books that I read. So Miller Hyman, Covey's got books around how to behave as an individual, how to think about people's interests, which I think is what you're talking about, Mary, is just trying to understand what the customer or the person you're interacting with is trying to accomplish, and then trying to, if you can, because sometimes you can't, map your capabilities to help support that need. And so that's using empathy, that's using questions, it's doing less talking and less pitching. And I think that really helped accelerate my ability to be successful as a sales individual, and certainly helped me develop a framework for myself in terms of what I thought was a best practice in terms of how I would approach things. And then I just leveraged that best practice when I started to run teams to impart that same wisdom into the organization that I was responsible for running. And of course, you're always optimizing, you're always looking for better ways to do it. And so just keeping a close eye on the kind of outcomes you were getting from your effort was an important part of helping us improve on how we were approaching things. So I think it's just being really committed to your craft of sales, being really committed to understanding from a curiosity perspective what's your customer grappling with on a day-to-day basis, both at a business level, at a departmental level, at a personal level within their profession. And I think if you can start to really get a good picture of what that is, you can be much more effective and certainly much more efficient in positioning your capabilities and helping them along to be more effective in what they're trying to accomplish.
And just a quick pause. Definitely want to get questions. If anything that we talk about piques some interest, please just raise your hand. Or if you have a burning question about just anything around sales development, please let us know. Sure.
I'm looking at HubSpot. I'm a startup, and I'm trying to figure out how HubSpot fits into my whole sales process. And I probably should talk to you afterwards, but HubSpot has the spies of all inbound and handling inbound. But as a small startup, it's all outbound. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on how flexible HubSpot is to do those kinds of things. I think it's a great product from what I can tell, but I don't know if it quite fits that. Might be a little too specific.
No, I think obviously it's a big question in the mind of folks, because a lot of people think about what's really hot right now is trying to set up outbound sales teams, but then in past years it was all inbound, right? Just like HubSpot's conference. So maybe we could kind of take a detour, maybe share a little bit about kind of your perspective, because you were in sales. How much of it was inbound? How much of it was outbound? And what did you think about kind of the process as a salesperson through that?
It's interesting to see the shift right now, actually. There's a lot of talk right now about outbound and ABM and all the different nuances and ways people are going about that. But I think for startups, and I always find it fascinating that today I still sell HubSpot. I feel like I will always sell HubSpot. But I think that startups in particular need to have a solid web presence. You need to have some level of consistent content strategy, whether that's blogging, whether that's adding pages to your website, whether that's landing pages or web forms, whatever that is. I know I'm hearing a lot of, oh, that's passe, people aren't blogging anymore. Baloney. You need to add content. You need to have some level of consistent content addition to the search engines, right? Whether it's video, whatever that might be, there has to be some level of optimized content that's going on. So, if you're considering HubSpot or if you're thinking about inbound strategies, I would think about what are you doing for your website today? Every single day, what are you adding to it? And content is the basis of that. So, whether you're considering long-tail keyword strategies or if you're considering buying, words using Google, whatever that is, those are all centered around some level of inbound, some level of organic strategy. So I would absolutely encourage every startup, every new company to wrap their arms around inbound, whether you buy HubSpot or not. That should absolutely be the center of your attention. And outbound, I think, comes after. I think that, if you're a company that's lucky enough to have forums or communities or some sense of meetups where people are already drawn to you for some reason, you have a nuance or a specialty, that's huge because that'll always give you some level of inbound capacity. But I think that takes time and work and energy to develop, and that should be, in my opinion, that should be at the center for you. Again, HubSpot aside, that's a strategy that needs to be developed for your success if you're looking for lead generation.
I always think of it as, if you don't have content, what are your salespeople actually talking about? So it's always good to, if you're going to have the content, have it on the website, make it available so that people that you call upon think you're a real company. There's three things as I was listening to you kind of relay your process or how you went about actually getting up to speed. I look at 3 levels. I'm hearing there's definitely a motivation component, that's self-motivation or drive. Then there's a process by how you kind of went about and did things. But I'm also intrigued about the word help. And you said multiple times that you look for help. So did you have any mentors, or was there any kind of process around that, getting the help that you needed so you felt comfortable, like you got the answers to your questions and you felt that you always had an open door to someone who could help you as you were developing your career?
Yeah, I think I didn't have any specific individual. I certainly had a good network of people that were in the industry that I could always tap into, and I was not afraid to do that. Even what might seem like the dumbest questions, you've got to be willing to ask those questions, because if you've got that question and you're not getting an answer to it, then you can think about the downstream impact of that. What I've learned about asking for help and finding help through leveraging books or forums is that it is critically important when you're leading a team to be able to provide a platform where your team members can get help. And if you're not committed to that, then your team members are going to have the same kind of have a poor experience at your company, and ultimately not be as effective as you would hope them to be in driving your business forward. So as a leader, putting that kind of framework in place, and there are various degrees of how you might want to do that depending on the size of your organization. Small startup has limitations, but you have to be committed as a leader to the growth of your people and finding ways to provide platforms for them to be able to engage in information and help and insight that will allow them to develop themselves not only as a professional, as a sales professional, but also personally. And when you do that, you demonstrate a really strong commitment to that individual from a company perspective, that you care about them, you care about their development, you're likely to retain them a lot longer than you might otherwise if of course, you want to retain them. So I think it's being committed to the growth of your people and putting the right processes and the right platforms in place to allow them to engage in those capabilities so that they can develop themselves, but also drive some of that forward by programs that you might want to bring to bear to the organization.
This is a really important one for me, and HubSpot did a lot of things well, but the one thing that was exemplary in my experience there was the commitment to people that leaders and managers had to their employees. And there were individuals there that without them, I would never have had the success that I had there. And there are people that I reach out to today when I have questions or concerns that would help me with anything. And I remember, I first started HubSpot, I had a newborn baby, and I'm in this training, and there's just all these things going on, and I remember sitting at home one day, and I had to learn how to build a website. I was the most non-technical person ever. I'm sitting in a bunch of room of people that already knew how to do it, and my husband, thank God, was an engineer. It was midnight one night, and I said, I cannot go into training class tomorrow without a website. I was like, give me your laptop, I'm gonna build one. So he built me a website, and thank God he did. And I remember saying to the trainer the next day at HubSpot, I'm like, I can sell, I can't build websites. He's like, I'm gonna help you. And I'll never forget it, because he said, I'm gonna get you through this, because once you're on the phone, all these technical folks you're sitting next to, you're gonna blow them away. And it was true, it was so fun. So we went into training class for actually role plays and selling, and I was able to hit my stride, and I was able to enjoy it and relax and just be able to shine. Now, I still had to ramp on the tool and figure out how to sell and do all those things, but I could sell, and that was something that I always could go home at the end of the day and be confident in. But, when Mark would come up to me at the end of the day and say, you're behind in terms of learning how to demo these 3 tools, I had my 3 go-to people at HubSpot where I said, you know what, tomorrow's Saturday, 10 to 11 or 10 to 12, can you help me get through these 2 tools? I need to figure this out because I've got to demo these to Mark on Monday. And they did. And the commitment level to people that employees had there from leadership down was unsurpassed. I've never seen it before. And I'll never forget, I was having a beer with Mike Volpe not too long ago. We were just kind of going through old times, and I said, you know, I feel like I can call you, I can call Mark, I can call Brian anytime, and we can just have these types of chats. And he's like, Mary, he's like, we fought a war together. And I was like, that's perfect. We did. We were all committed to each other, and we weren't giving up no matter what anyone told us on the street. We were going to be seeing it through to the end, and that's all about helping, and it was a great success.
So Frank, did you have anything like specific programs you put in place that maybe got people together or created mentoring or any sort of assistance for the junior reps to help them get up to speed faster?
Yeah, so I'm very committed to onboarding people in the proper way. As a sales leader, one of my key metrics is time to productivity. The quicker we can stand someone up and make them successful, obviously the more we're going to get out of them, the more productive they'll be. So making sure that you're really committed to that onboarding process, having a very clear structure around what that process should be. I take it as far as developing certification capabilities around different attributes that we're looking for our salespeople to be able to present against. So being able to deliver a strong demo, being able to converse with different types of personas that we're selling into. So having a fairly rigorous process around that and being very demanding upfront around your expectations with folks so that they know that their feet are on the fire to get their act together and get their act together quickly. I think people learn best. I think we all are at our best when we're under a little bit of stress. I'm not suggesting that you manage your people that way all the time, but when you bring folks on, make sure that you've got a really good, strong program that's going to put them to work fast. Make sure that you've got a buddy there to help them along so that they have someone that they can confide in without having to feel like they're going to get themselves in trouble with their boss because they may or may not understand something or know something. So I think that's an important part of it, where you give them an outlet to be able to ask those dumb questions, if you will, or ask those questions that they're really uncomfortable with, because because the business has an orientation that you're unfamiliar with. And I think that is a key program. And then of course, training is not an event. Onboarding is not an event. Training is an ongoing process that you've got to continually be focused on, continually put your people through, continually re-energize them with new capabilities, retool them on the same capabilities that you trained them on through the onboarding process, because it's very easy for them to forget. We all retain a small portion of what we learn through the learning process. And so recognizing that that's a fact, and having an ongoing program that continually reinforces the key messages that you think are critical to them being successful in their role is a key component of the structure that I put in place.
Yeah, just a little bit more about that program. Yeah, please.
Hi. You mentioned that in your career you've come into organizations where sales team wasn't very sophisticated, wasn't much structure, people were able to kind of coast a little bit because they were getting paid out of one big bucket of money. So can you just talk to what it was like coming into that and infusing a metrics-driven organization? I mean, I'm sure some people didn't like that. When you're not used to being measured and then someone comes in and wants to measure you, how did you handle that? How did you manage that? And what was that experience like?
So just to repeat the question for folks on the video. So what was that process for going into some of those companies that were maybe not so rigorous in their processes and getting them to be at a place where it was much more process-driven and much more, I wouldn't say it's necessarily regimented, but at least more accountability in the team?
So I'm deep in the throes of that right now. I'm on day 53 of my newest role, and very similar situation. And it starts from the top. And so I have to demonstrate that I am highly committed to imparting this kind of change within the organization. And my first step is to find my leaders, my managers who are running the organization. So I have a team of about 50 right now. The other example that I gave you when I started there was a team of about 45 or so. So I had some structure in place. It wasn't a startup. So getting to those sales leaders and bringing them along in a way that they felt like they were participating in the change, that it wasn't just me imparting my way on them, is a key component to what I think makes me successful in bringing a sales organization that is unsophisticated along to a much more structured and sophisticated approach. And so if I don't have their buy-in, then I'm never going to be able to move that organization. So starts there, and I'm right there now. I'm probably 60% of the way down the path with my region leaders. I've got someone in the US, EMEA, and APAC. So very different orientation in terms of the markets they're focused on, very different orientation in terms of the way they view their business culture. And so I've got to navigate through those dynamics to get them to work together, to build consensus, to be collaborative in terms of how we evolve the organization in a very productive way. And then as they become committed to it, the downstream effect will help support some of the disruption that it will create, because there are folks that are going to be very uncomfortable with the change. There are some folks that are going to want to make the change but are not capable of making that change, and they're eventually probably going to move on. There are others that are going to want to make that change and are going to need a lot of hand-holding to get there, but they'll get there, and so making sure that you identify who those folks are. And then there are those that are going to be enthusiastically coming along for the ride, and you want to be able to make sure that you give them proper guidance so that when they come along for that ride, they're doing it the way you want them to. And then you leverage them as leaders, as examples, case studies, use cases, if you will, on how to get things done properly. But it's a process. This is not something you're going to be able to flip a switch and be able to move your organization along to a new place, because we don't change that quickly. We need to feel like we're participating in that process, that we're contributing to the evolution of the organization, and if you can create a platform where people feel like that they're part of that process, their engagement level will increase dramatically. So I think that's critically important.
Definitely want to ask Mary your perspective, because you're coming into a new organization. And so what is it like to actually start to put in some of this process from an organization that really is pretty young, just starting up, may not necessarily know all the things about the market, and they're still evolving some of that. So maybe you could speak to the earlier startup experience in that perspective.
I'm finding the most challenging part is getting buy-in from the leadership team on how I want to do things. So I'm being mentored on this at this moment because I'm struggling with it. So what I'm being told is, whenever I'm at odds with the CEO who I report into or other people in the leadership team, take a step back and look through their lens. See how they're seeing it. The gentleman who's our CEO is a first-time CEO. He's got a lot at stake. He's got a lot of things that he has to do right. And the choice that I make, if he goes along with it, it's his neck on the line. So that's helped me quite a bit, actually, to look at it in that way. There are no processes. There are no one to go to when I'm not sure what to do. So I call Mark Roberge a lot. But I use a ton of my resources of people that have helped me along the way. And sometimes I make a lot of mistakes. And it's okay. I think as long as you're able to say, okay, let's fail fast. Let's figure it out. Let's pick ourselves up and get moving. I mean, we've had big deals go awry because we didn't make the best choices on how we chose to do things, and we sometimes call that prospect back and say, we made a mistake, we want to look at this differently, let's talk this through and let's brainstorm, and sometimes we get it back. So I think when there is a lack of process, I think that it's okay to be a human being, it's okay to talk to people that know more or know better, and I think that sometimes what's hard for me is, I'm a HubSpotter, and HubSpotters sometimes think they know everything, and we don't. And it is absolutely not always the right way to go, because we were successful. There were other people with very, very valid opinions on things, and I think that's hard, especially in sales when I feel like I know the process and I know what I need to do to get a big deal. There are very valid opinions that marketing holds or that customer success holds that can come in, and together we can form an amazing collaborative process that will go get that deal. But I think for me, when I want to talk or when I want to say something, sometimes it's a big effort for me to stop talking, take a step back, and really hear what everyone is saying, and I'm learning how to go about that.
Some questions for both of you, actually. Great points. The question is, Mary just touched upon that you have to work with other departments. Now, sales most of the time is the one department that is face-to-face with prospects and clients. Marketing is the one that tries to do the inbounds, all those things, and then customer success is the ones that they think that they do everything right. So everybody in the equation thinks they're doing everything right. The way you communicate with your teams to communicate with those other folks, how that has changed from this time you started sales until today, like you're running teams, and what you can share with us to make it easier to have those inner communications to drive the numbers game, to close more business.
I think because I'm in such an early stage startup, we're all selling. So very often, because our persona is marketers, very often I have the VP of marketing come in and I'll have her, because I understand the goals, I'll have her align one of the software features of our product to the goal, because it's a credibility thing. Let's take sales out of the equation, and the VP of marketing comes in and says, you know, I've used Marketo. Let me tell you why you coming off of Marketo could be difficult, but why Mautic is a better choice for you, and she does it as a marketer. So the reason I share that with you is we have our other departments coming into the sale. Very often in our bigger sales, when we have multiple business units for enterprises, I have our customer success lead come in and I have her describe exactly what it's like in a kickoff or in the onboarding, because I want them to hear how much we're wrapping our arms around them, because their biggest concern is they have all these campaigns to bring over from another automation tool, and they're like, how can I do this? How can I do it? It's going to disrupt my business. Well, if you actually meet our team and understand how we transition you over, you're going to understand that we are not going to let you fail. We're going to work with you. So in an early stage startup, all of the departments are working together to onboard, especially big customers. This very rarely is a department lead not involved. We have a massive deal going on right now, and every one of our leadership team, including one of our board members, are on these calls. So I hope that touches on what your question is, but in an early stage, we're all doing it. We're all doing the selling.
Maybe, I'd love to hear, just before we get to the next question, I'd love to hear Frank's perspective, because from a bigger company perspective, how do you get all those internal groups to coordinate, right?
Yeah, so it's work. It's not going to come easy. And the stereotypes are that we're always at odds with all these different departments within the organization, because we never really get what we need from them. And we're out there fighting the good fight, and we deserve to have them follow what we're asking them to do. I look at it a little bit differently. I try to think of them as important tools to help facilitate my success. And so my first job when I walk into a new organization is to build strong bridges with every one of the departments from finance up, and make sure that I understand what's important to them, how they're running their business, how they think about the business, so that I have some empathy for what they're contending with, because they've got resource issues as well. They've got systems issues. You guys are laughing. Yeah, you've been.
No, you never experienced any of that.
Yeah. We've never been there. So I think it's really important to take a leadership role in building those bridges. Don't leave it up to them to try to build those bridges, because they may not. And if they don't, then that's on your shoulders, because that's support that you need in the field. So I'll take a few for the team on occasion to make sure that I have good, strong relationships with the people that are going to support our efforts. So alignment is really important, understanding what's important to them, why they're thinking about the way that they're doing things, and then as that relationship evolves, I can start to influence the way that they think, that I think might get us better lift in our efforts. It's not a perfect science, because we have personalities that get involved, and we all have experiences that have had some friction associated with them. So part of our job is to change the perception of how sales and marketing, sales and finance, sales and customer service, sales and HR work together. And so I put it upon myself to make that change, and I worked really hard at it. And from a CEO perspective, I'm always trying to think in terms of his interests, why he's thinking the way he might be thinking, and then how do I fit the way that I might want to influence that CEO into his equation. And if I can do that successfully, I'm going to get what I need out of him or her. I'm going to get the change that I'm going to need, that I think is critically important to us being able to accelerate our business. So it's really stepping back and letting your ego go a bit, and being very responsive to those that are critical to your success.
Actually,
Hello.
Just really quick, so would you agree that the exact same strategy you would advise a potential enterprise prospect for a sale or implementation at enterprise level is your strategy when dealing with or changing an organization internally that needs some work, like what you're talking about, right? Like what's in it for them, all the stakeholders, different departments, etc.
I think it's really important to understand the concepts and start there. So I'm not here to tell you, I'm here to understand what you're all about, what you're grappling with, what resource restrictions you have, why things are the way they are, and then let's try to evolve that collectively. So let me share with you some of my ideas. Some of them may work, some of them may not work, but let's try to do that in a collaborative way. And if the organization has not been behaving that way, you've got some heavy lifting there and trust to build, right? Because the first step is to break down a couple of barriers from old relationships that might have been in place in the past. And so that means you've got to demonstrate that you're a trustworthy, empathetic, passionate, and considerate partner with that other department.
Let's add like one last thing to that point. We actually had a gentleman by the name of Tim Sanders who spoke at the Boston Enterprise Sales Forum in August. I'd encourage you to check out the YouTube video of that, because he actually wrote a book called Deal Storming and it talks about building internal consensus and team building. And what he did early days when Broadcast.com was purchased, where he was working as a rep by Yahoo, he didn't know Yahoo. But he knew he needed the resource of Yahoo to be successful. So he would actually sit at lunch with the engineers, then the product managers, the marketers, the customer success people. So eventually they all knew who he was. So he went out of his way to do the bridge building. So I definitely encourage you to check out his talk. Really, really brilliant stuff. Carol.
So I know that we're talking about continuous development, and a lot of times when we think of that, we think of that being focused on the individual rep. How do we get them to continuously develop? The two of the things that I hear a lot from sales managers and leaders, one being, I don't want my shortcomings to be the collateral damage to my team, is what a lot of managers say. And then I also hear them say in the next breath, but as a sales rep, I had all of the support. I had these mentors, and I had these people that I could go to and bounce ideas off of and peers. But the more I seem to rise in my organization, the less feedback, support, and mentoring I seem to get. So I was wondering, from both the large business perspective and the small business working in startups, as you've risen into these leadership positions, how have you continued your continuous development? How have you found those mentors, and how have you kept your game so that you can then help them keep on their game?
Super important question. Basically, what does it take as you're a manager? How are you sharpening your own tool set effectively? And the first part, just the question about.
So the first part of the question was, and we all have our shortcomings.
Sure.
So how do you address your shortcomings so that they don't become collateral damage to the team without that mentorship and development?
Okay. Making sure we nip the bad habits in the bud, so to speak. I'll let Mary kind of run with this first.
So I think about this a lot. I only have 2 folks that report into me today, but I'm always thinking about what my weaknesses are, and I do not want to pass these on to my team. I do encourage my team, and this is easy in a startup, to always talk to other members. The CEO sits right in the next queue, right? If I'm working at home one day, if I'm not there, if I'm busy, please go over to Matt, talk with him, ask him what he thinks. He's actually fantastic, and he's really, really helpful to give a completely different perspective. And my team really appreciates that. Same thing with our head of marketing or head of customer success or any member of our team. They're always helpful. For me, I'm always thinking about how can I continually improve. So being that there's no other sales folks above me here, I'm always thinking about how am I going to develop. So I'm always continuing the network. I think about what keeps the fire in my belly, what am I passionate about, and I have very recently been looking at new podcasts, and I'm subscribing to different podcasts around Boston, BC community, because I love that. That keeps me really, really inspired. I don't know if you guys do this on your commute to work, but I find that I spend that 30 minutes or 40 minutes on my commute, and I feel like I've been talking to the person, like David Cancel's Seeking Wisdom. I'm like, I feel like I could go in and have coffee with him. I feel like I listen to him every day. And there's a connection that you feel when you're listening to folks consistently, and I'm learning so much. Mike Troiano has a great podcast called How Hard Can It Be?
Right.
Fantastic if you're interested in the Boston, BC community. And I love his podcast, but he talks all about people, and he says to them, not just tell me about what you're investing in and what's important to you. He says, tell me where you grew up. And you learn all about these people, and you just become really attached to the whole initiative. So I talk about these things with my team too, as I'll say, what podcast are you guys listening to? What are you interested in? Are you doing anything on social media? So I'm trying to get them to think outside of just prospecting and talking sales. Like, what else are you doing that's of interest? But in the small startup, you have to be thinking beyond the walls of where you work. You have to go out to the people that you know in your network and figure out what you're passionate about and expand that.
Yeah, I would say that's not just in small companies, that's in your career. So you have to build a network for yourself. If that kind of mentorship is not available to you in your organization, you haven't found someone that you feel that you can trust, and can give you the kind of feedback that will help you develop yourself, help you identify those blind spots that you have or those gaps in your capabilities, then you've got to go outside. You have a responsibility as a professional to build a network of relationships that you can tap into, that you can share your challenges with, share your successes with, know that you can trust that they're going to give you good, honest, candid feedback. And then I think you've got to leverage different podcasts, TED Talks, read books, be a voracious and interesting learner. And if you do that, I think that you'll be able to continually develop yourself. You know, there are lots of good programs that come out of Wharton and Harvard, so if your company has the wherewithal, or you have the wherewithal to be able to invest in yourself that way, they're fantastic programs. And within those programs, you build tremendous networks with people that you can use for the life of your career, and maybe even beyond. And so I think you've just got to be really committed to that development that could most likely come from outside of the organization, and it's going to come from a variety of different channels.
Super awesome. Yeah, question.
Yeah, so I just had a question for Mary. You mentioned a couple times that you've known that you are really good at sales and have a talent for it, but you started off in accounting. So, Frank mentioned that he's studied Miller Hyman. Was it something that, like, just intrinsically you just naturally were good at sales, or did it come from other means, that ability?
And by the way, question, how did you know you were actually good at sales? And I will be the first to admit that I was actually flat out terrible at sales, but I'd love to hear your story.
I didn't know that I was good at sales early on, trust me, at all, and sometimes I wonder if I still am. But I think that I knew that I loved helping, and that sounds kind of, it's cliche, but I really do like feeling like I'm moving the needle for someone. And if you give me something to sell, especially if I'm interested in it, like I loved HubSpot's mission, I loved their vision, I loved denting the universe with inbound marketing. There was something about it that it gave me so much fulfillment. When you go to inbound and my customers were coming up and hugging me, some of them are my friends today, it's just something about it. So I think that the skill of selling developed over time. Now, when I walked into that recruiting firm and I felt the energy and the buzz and I knew I wanted to be there, I went through trainings, of course. I did Miller Hyman, I did ASHO, I did all these trainings because they were intrinsic in the training programs that I went through with Monster, as well as HubSpot. But I do feel like there was this natural inclination. I'm not an extrovert either, by the way. I think I'm more of what they call an ambivert, which is in between the introvert and extrovert, and I think that's what helps me to be more empathetic in my approach. It's the side of me that makes me listen more versus talk. I actually used to view that as a weakness for myself, but I actually view it as a massive strength now, where I can take a step back and really stop talking. And I don't know if you guys do this, I love doing it in the close. I love when I am at the point where I've had those closing conversations where we've got the right people on the phone and you've said what the price is and there's that silence, and the first person that talks loses. Awesome. I love it. The longer it goes, the better. Something about it. But anyway, it certainly I have this natural inclination, but there's been lots and lots of training in my 20 years of selling and lots of people that I acclimate to. And really want to learn more from, but I am intrigued and interested in all aspects of selling, and I continue to be super hungry to learn more.
Yeah, good question. To your point, all great behaviors and attitudes and beliefs and so forth. When you're interviewing, especially you're in a startup and maybe you're in the same situation, younger people. Well, let's face it, nobody comes out of school with a degree that says sales. So most of these people have come out of school with some other alternate degree, as we all probably did. How do you, suss out, interview? Do you use assessments? Third-party assessments, quantitative assessments? It's just a gut feeling. How do you, the stuff that you talked about that made you successful in whatever manner? How do you kind of figure that out when you're in? And they don't have a track record. They weren't. I was with IBM for 15 years, so they don't have that track record.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Just so I can repeat the question, right? So obviously you've developed in your career, you've figured out some things. How are you packaging that up so that the people you bring in the organization are that right mold that you need for your organization to be successful?
It's a great question. I'm all about the human being. I'm not about looking at the resume and saying, if I'm hiring for an enterprise rep, they have to do 10 years of field and they have to bring in named accounts. I couldn't care less. I care deeply about what this person has to say, about what they're passionate about, where they're coming from, certainly, what kinds of companies that they've worked for, what they've done. I, of course, want to hear those things. I'm interested in their story. I interviewed someone recently that told me that he was let go from his last company. And I said, well, tell me more about that. You're here interviewing for a sales role, but you were just let go and you're telling me that. Tell me more. He's like, I couldn't keep up with what they had me doing. Their training was rigorous. They wanted me to make 80 calls a day, and much of what I needed to do and wanted to do was talk to the prospect and learn. I thought, okay, all right, I still want to learn more. I checked his references. I had more conversations with him. And I thought to myself, who tells an interviewer that they got let go? Nobody. They'll usually say, there was a mutual thing or whatever. There was something about it that made me want to learn more about this person, and I'm more apt to give that person a go because they're clearly honest. They're someone that wants to do the right thing but couldn't quite figure out how to do it within that structure. But maybe that would work in my environment, and it may not, but maybe it could be a match. But I'm interested in the human element. Now may not work for someone with, Frank's company who has to hire, 25 sales reps that have to have certain acumen and all of that. But for me in a startup, it's more about how does this person fit in the molding? Can they commit? Do they have the mental toughness to deal with what they have to go through in a startup with the massive ups and downs that you're going to deal with? That's what I care about.
Yeah, so full transparency, I've never really hired anybody directly out of school, but I think what Mary, you're saying here is it's about their attitude and how they present themselves, how honest they can be about their situation. Are they self-effacing? These are the kind of people that you're going to want in your organization because you're going to push them hard. They're going to be challenged, and they have to be willing to look at themselves and understand where their strengths and weaknesses are, something that they can focus on the areas that are weak so they can improve. They don't have that capability, they don't have that openness about who they are as a person, and I think it's very difficult for them to eventually evolve into an asset that you're going to find productive within whatever role you're asking them to play. And that does come down to attitude. And it's an inexact science. When we're talking about human beings, people will present themselves extremely well in an interviewing process, and 3 months later, you're going to find you could potentially find something completely different. So it starts with knowing what you want, and that includes culturally. So what kinds of folks are you looking for to have into your organization that's going to fuel the culture of the organization that is ultimately fueling the success of that company, and finding people that you feel will be a good contributor to that environment. And again, it's an inexact science. I think you can throw all the data you want at it, and you're still going to have your misses. So I prefer to find people that have been through a few rounds with a company or two and have had some experience, so that they've found their way a little bit, at least know what they don't want. Because I think then your probability of success with that individual increases pretty dramatically.
I want to share one thing. We'll take a few more questions, close things up. I do want to hit on this real key thing here about motivation, right? Like even though the things that are inexact when you're bringing people on or when you're managing folks, like motivation is so huge. So can you give maybe some perspectives on how you think about motivation? Everyone's coming from different places, having different experiences. So how do you keep the team focused, driven, determined? Obviously, a lot of that has to come internal. But are there things that you can do externally that will help drive that motivation?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's demonstrating your commitment to them and their success, taking the vested interest in who they are as individuals and who they are as a group, and then behaving that way consistently. And if you do that, then you'll develop trust with them. And that's very motivating for people, that they know they're in an environment where they are trusted, that that the company cares about them, whether they're doing well or not, that they're going to invest in helping them become more successful or improve on the gaps that they may have. So I think it comes from your leadership. It comes from how you demonstrate your commitment to them as individuals, that vested interest that you show in who they are and caring about who they are as a person, not just as an asset that's going to deliver productivity for the organization, goes a very long way in developing an individual and their desire and their passion to want to work hard for you and hard for the business.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I'll share a story with you. There was a really, really rough month we had at HubSpot in the early days. And I remember Mark rallied all of us. There was like 30 of us. There was only 30 sales reps at the time. And he said, come on, we're all going out for drinks. And we're looking at each other like, are you kidding me? Like, we should just be staying here for at least the next 3 to 4 hours just to drum up some productivity for next month. He's like, no, we're going to go out. And we went over to the bar across the street. I think we were at CSE at the time. And we're sitting there, and I looked at him, and I said, what are we doing here? And he's like, hey, I care about every one of you in terms of how you're thinking about the process at HubSpot, how you're thinking about what we're doing here today. And I want to know, he's like, what do you think about what happened this month? And just the fact that he sort of deciphered from me, the little cog in the wheel who just started a few months before that, he cared about what I had to say. And what he did at that moment was reinforce his commitment to me, this little sales rep that didn't know anything about SEO or software. And he was telling me, I care deeply about how you think about this process. I care about what you're going to do next month. And it isn't just about celebrating the wins. It's also, we're in this together. We are committed to each other. I'd never seen that before, because we only used to go out and have beers when we had a good month. So it was amazing to me. And I remember going home that night, I'm driving home, and I said to myself, tomorrow morning when I get up, I'm working. Because this guy just told me that he really deeply cares about me. And whether or not it was true or not, I just felt this level of energy and motivation. And HubSpot became my hobby. I was doing it on weekends, the evenings, I was loving it, because I knew I was surrounded by a leadership team of people that were really invested.
We'll take one last question.
You win together, you lose together. And if you don't bring that kind of mindset to your organization, then people will feel like they are easily shed from the company, and they'll never be as passionate or committed to the organization or you. I'd also say that every word that comes out of your mouth as a sales leader is listened to extremely closely. So watch your words, right? And I mean, watch your words with how you talk about people, how you talk to your CEO, how you talk to the receptionist at the front door. Because that is going to demonstrate to people in your organization how committed you are to them, to the organization, and how committed you are to your behavior. Because you can seem passionate and caring about an individual, but if you run down the hallway and you talk about someone behind their back, people are going to snuff that out in a second. So it's really important that you maintain consistency across that organization so that they see what you are all about, what you represent as a leader in that organization, and what you mean, what you're committed to in terms of that individual and the organization.
One last question.
Yep. Hi. First of all, thank you for your time today. This was a very good panel. One of the things that I'm always interested in is finding out what's are some of the key traits that successful sales reps have? And beyond sales skills themselves, what I find is that they make it easier for customers to buy. Right? Whether that's a joint agreement plan, whether that's bringing in that customer success person like you mentioned. I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on what are some of the things that you've done to make it easier for customers to buy from you versus the competition.
Yeah, so sales, what are like the unique traits that really make salespeople successful beyond just the pure mechanical skills or some behaviors that you've seen? One thing I'll just point out, I always love curiosity. That for me was a big thing, but please share.
I'm going to give it to the real salesperson in the room here.
Does anyone here know Dan Tyre?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so Dan Tyre trained me when I was new at HubSpot, and he made me build rapport. Hate building rapport. I am all business. He would say, oh, here she comes, Rogul, she's all business, she's going to close some deals. It was hurting me. And he said, if you can take a step back, talk about the weather, because I always felt like men could talk about sports, and I wasn't good at that. And I'm like, what am I going to talk about? No one really cares about anything. And I would do this because he was making me do it. He would say, ask him, where are you right now? Oh, you're in, you're in Puerto Rico. Oh, it must be better than Boston. It's 20 below zero here. And I would start doing it. It was so mechanical. It was awful. But I did it because he was like, trust me, it's going to be worth your while to build this rapport. And now, and that was how many years ago? 7, 8 years ago now. Now, I never start a conversation without some level of rapport building. And it's very natural for me now, and it is a massive differentiator. And it's not the disgenuine rapport, by the way. It's not the 3 seconds of, oh, where are you located? Oh, great. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Oh, so, so let's just jump back in and let's talk about this feature. It is genuine. Like this woman, one particular woman was in LA, and this was in February when I was talking with her, and I call her, and she was always complaining about how hot it was there. It was like 85 or 90 degrees, and I'd say, oh, like, Elizabeth, what are we looking at here? She's like, oh, Mary, it's 85 degrees here today. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's 30 degrees and raining. And granted, I mean, it is, we're having the same conversation. But a week later when I call her, I haven't closed the deal, but I'm right there. A week later, I'm like, I left a message because she wasn't returning my calls. I left a message, I'm like, Elizabeth, I'm giving you the weather update. It's 15 degrees and rainy here. I'm looking at LA. It's 95. I don't want to hear any complaints. She called me back like that because she thought it was cute. She ended up liking me. And people buy from people that they like. And even though it was a little bit of small talk, I was developing rapport with her. We ended up becoming friendly. That type of thing is difficult for many people, and for me, if I never met Dan Tyre, I never would have done it. I don't think I would be as good as a salesperson as I am today if I didn't develop that piece of my process. But it has allowed me to start conversations in a way where people, they drop their, okay, this is a sales pitch. They drop that. Yeah, they're now talking to me as a person. I sometimes talk about my kids. If someone just says, oh, I'm sorry, I'm running late. My wife was running behind with the boys. I'm like, oh, I have 2 boys, 8 and 10. We'll start talking about that. That becomes a starter every single time I'm on the phone with them. And I think that is a really big one. The other thing is just genuinely caring about their business, regardless of where you are on the sales cycle, right? So when I'm a firm believer in every single conversation as a close opportunity from discovery to close. Whenever I get on the phone, I'm always thinking through where were we in the last part of that conversation and what value have I added for them since the last time that I've spoken to them. What piece of information can I give them that is going to make a difference for them today, regardless if they buy what I'm selling. And I inherently carry that. Like, to me, that's important. If I can walk away and say, I know you had mentioned July, it's been pushed out to July. I think it may be helpful for you to hop on the phone for 30 minutes with our customer success lead. I know you're struggling with a free trial. I'm going to have her walk you through a free session because I want to get you over that hump. I know it's going to be helpful for you. We'll table the discussion later on the software. And I do it because I want to be helpful, but I also, of course, know it's going to help my sales process. So I think just being genuine in your approach and finding what you're comfortable with and using that as a lever really will give you a huge, huge opportunity in your selling.
I don't have much to add to that. I think that when I think about sales, I think of it as being about 80% science and about 20% art. I think this is part of the art piece of it, which is you have to be able to engage people at some level. We all do it in different ways. Some of us are wildly enthusiastic and high energy. Some of us are quiet and very focused in the way that we interact with people. And so finding ways to connect with folks is an important part of building trust. But I think there's a whole science piece to what we do that I think a lot of sales folks are not very good at, that disciplined approach to how they execute their job. And that doesn't mean putting all of your information in Salesforce and making a perfect presentation, but it does mean that you have some sense of a discipline around what that recipe for success looks like when you move a customer through the buying process. And a lot of salespeople just, at least in my experience, just don't come, it's certainly not a natural thing to do. And so you have to impart that knowledge and that discipline into their process. And when they do that, I think that really dramatically improves their ability to measure the efficacy of their effort. And when you can measure the efficacy of your effort, then you can figure out what you need to do next to get better. If you don't know what you've done, it's very difficult to figure out what you need to do. So I'm a big proponent of having that level of discipline within your process, but not doing it in such a way that suffocates people. I've been a sales guy. I know what that's about, and I've seen processes that are very suffocating. So you have to balance how much discipline and process you want to put into the equation, given the kind of market you may be serving or the experience of your sales organization. But I think it's pretty important if you're going to drive consistency and scalability into your organization.
That's awesome. For me, I've always loved curiosity. I came from an engineering background, and I fell into sales because my boss said if you don't sell, you're you could be doing something else, but not here. So, for me, I didn't know anything about sales. I didn't even know that there was this thing called Miller Hyman. I think I eventually found spin selling down the road, but what worked for me was I just was curious. I didn't know anything, so I would ask questions. And I was curious. I generally didn't know. Well, okay, what's the situation? Well, why do you do that? And just had a conversation, but not trying to have an interrogation, just being naturally curious. I think that was a real big part for me. And I want to share that because I think sometimes we forget that we're actually having like human-to-human conversations, not human to robots or random voices over a phone. So just always keep it real. I want to close it out with, you mentioned podcasts before, Mary, so I'd love to hear from Frank, Mary. Is there like a resource recently that you've maybe read or a movie that's been inspiring or a podcast, something that you might want to share with folks? I'll give you a little bit of time to think. I've been digging a lot into podcasts, so I'm a big fan of Sales Success Stories. The podcast, it's just a story with one top performer. It's kind of like Tim Ferriss, but just with the top performer in the company. So this guy, Scott Ingram's done a lot of, good number of interviews, and they're really, really fascinating because he digs in for about an hour about what made that particular person successful. So that's been kind of my recent, really cool thing that I come upon.
I think the most recent one that has enlightened me a bit and helped me enlighten an organization is, I don't know if you've seen this TED Talk called Radical Candor. Has anybody seen that? It's Dave Brown. I'm not even sure of her name. I'm so interested in her content that the name is just blown by me. But it really speaks to how an organization or individual should interact with each other. And that interaction is built on trust and honesty and being direct and transparent, as opposed to being, I think she called it ISV, I think, which is the, biggest asshole in Silicon Valley, was describing one of the characterizations of what not to be. The other, which is one that I think a lot of us fall into as an organization because we're trying to build a great culture, is called ruinous empathy. And ruinous empathy means that we are almost too afraid to be direct with people. And so you're so nice to people that you never really get to the meat of what's going on. And I think the example that she gives around ruinous empathy is a person that she had on her team that had been working at the company for a long time. Everybody loved this guy. He was friendly with people, but he was horrible at his job. But she somehow kind of kept him in that role for a long time, and then one day he walked into her office and she let him go. And he was so surprised by that. Why did you let me go? I thought you liked me. I thought everybody liked me. Well, the ruinous empathy in that story is that she wasn't direct with him. She wasn't transparent with him about the real challenges that he had, the impact that he had on the organization, that people were actually kind of laughing at him behind his back. And not being direct to that person and being honest with that individual was ruinous for that individual, and it was sending the wrong message within the organization. It's a fabulous TED Talk. It's about 18 minutes long, and to evolve your organization to radical candor is a bit of an art, because folks want to be too radical in their candor. There's something called being professional, being thoughtful in how you're delivering your candor to individuals, so you have to really work at how you execute against that notion. But if you can get there, I think it creates a much healthier environment for an organization, big or small. Particularly in small companies, you got to have it, because you're fighting a war day to day, and if you're not able to be that truthful and honest with each other in a respectful manner, then you're probably not going to be successful.
I don't know if you guys have heard of Brené Brown. I'm pronouncing that correctly. She does an amazing TED Talk on vulnerability, and I really brought that into my selling. I'm huge on women in tech, and something about how she talks about vulnerability in business. I used to view that as such a weakness of mine, and I actually will revisit that TED Talk at least once a year, sometimes more. She spoke at Inbound last year, and something about just the truthfulness and the way that she comes to you. I just feel like if we could all be more vulnerable, I think we could all connect more as human beings, and we could see each other's shortcomings and realize that we're all in this together. But I love her. I also love Gary Vee. I am a sucker for Gary Vee. I just love the way he is out there, and it is what it is. I can really understand when he talks about how, in his younger days, how everyone just thought he just wasn't that smart, and he just couldn't get through some of these classes, and at the end of the day, the guy was just an entrepreneur at heart, and that's what he wanted to be. And kudos to him for just bringing it to the table. But I love following him. And as I mentioned earlier, huge fan of David Cancel, who started Drift. He was the CTO over at HubSpot. I love his Seeking Wisdom podcast. He motivates me every single day. And then my very favorite podcast is Mike Triano. He was the CMO at Activio. He's recently gone over to G20 Ventures, and he's big on entrepreneurs and their stories and what they're doing for the Boston community.
Awesome. Well, we've had we'll stick around for a little bit. I think folks have some other questions, so that'd be really great. I don't think we touched upon a lot of different topics, which was cool. If you have more questions about continuous sales development, developing yourself, your teams, obviously we're continuing to do lots and lots of these talks. If you have any ideas for talks, let me know, let Nadia know, somewhere back there. Hey, Nadia.
Hi.
My team finally arrived.
Yay, Nadia.
Part of it. And I really do mean this sincerely. If you want to get involved and be part of what we're trying to build here, we're doing these talks both in the city now and out here in the suburbs. And we're really excited to bring more content, more speakers, and get more folks involved. So let us know. And thanks again to Everbridge. This was super, super awesome. Thank you for having us here. And we look forward to having a few more this year, so we'll be back in this space. And we'll make some announcements about the next event. But most importantly, let's give a round of applause to our awesome speakers. Thank you.